The bridge was constructed 2 years ago from the A9 route in Kilinochchi-Parandan along the Mattupetti road. While over 4 million rupees were spent for the construction of this bridge, a part of the bridge collapsed on the 6th of December, pushing those who depend on the route onto grave difficulty. Under the Gamperaliya program headed by the former government, the road reconstructed 3 months ago in Kilinochchi, Karacha-Thiruvayyar faces such a fate at present. Residents further mentioned that the construction of this road was aided by S. Sridharan. Gamperaliya and many such programs that misused public funds in the present and former governments bears evidence as instances where public money have been squandered, and therefore the general public of this nation will teach those public representatives a proper lesson in the upcoming general election.
And a very good morning to you. This is NEWSLINE Live, and we're broadcasting from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. We started off the program this morning with that clip about the real need to have some discipline when it comes to spending the public's monies on services and amenities for and on behalf of the public. And we'll give you at Newsfirst an update on several such departures from proper procedure and proper standard. And this morning on NEWSLINE Live, we've got somebody who's a member of the expert panel on constitutional reform, and she's also an attorney at law, and she's right here with us whilst we pose the question, what of the 19th Amendment? Very good morning to you, Chamindri Sapramadu.
Good morning, Faraz.
Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I've got here a copy of the Constitution as well, but let me ask you by starting off by asking you about the 19th Amendment. The only reason I ask that is because there's been a lot of reference to the 19th Amendment both before the presidential election, after it, and to some people the statement by President Nandasena Gotabaya Rajapaksa that if he had the necessary, he would cancel it out. To some people, it's worrying. So I'd like to ask you, what is wrong with the 19th Amendment? Why do you need to cancel it, amend it? Why?
First of all, I like to, I'm not aware, I'm not sure whether the President is talking about abolishing the entirety of the 19th Amendment. But certainly I think time has come to revisit the 19th Amendment, because we have seen in the last 4.5 years what we have experienced is evidence enough to show convince us of the failings of the 19th Amendment. I say this because we have seen two power centers, and that has triggered a lot of tensions within the government, which resulted in virtually a dysfunctional state, and that the government could not move ahead with certain if you look at, for example, policy making, I will take that as an example. We have seen the confusing state of affairs where the former president and the former prime minister had two parallel processes for policy making. So similarly, like you have seen when even in the decision making process, that there has been a lot of disagreement, confusion, lack of coherence. I think all of that is a reason why you need to revisit the 19th Amendment.
And there are people who say that the 19th Amendment, with the 19th Amendment, no one can really rule or govern the country.
I think it's partly correct, because you need to have a fallback position. You need to have someone to decide. Now, decision making can be participatory, but where does who finally decides was an issue.
Thank you very much for your questions. Some people have already started sending the questions. Of course, we do encourage you to send us your questions, because after all, this is your program, the People's Program, and we'd like to ask your questions from our guests. 0772 300 305 is the number. 0772 300 305, card coming up on your screen. And of course, we are in conversation with Chamindri Sapramadu, who knows a thing or two about the proposed constitutional reforms. And of course, we apologize for the late start this morning, in case we didn't say so before. And here we go. So, Chamindri, what chances, though, of amending the 19th Amendment? Is it going, as you said before, you're not sure yet whether the President means abolishing it or fine-tuning the 19th Amendment?
Well, actually, it can only be amended or even abolished through another constitutional amendment, which
Right.
will be called the 20th Amendment. I'm not aware of exactly what the President has in mind, but going by his manifesto, it does
Yeah.
talk about constitutional reforms. It does refer to a parliamentary select committee being set up to look at reforming the executive, the electoral system, provincial councils, and so on. So I'm not, I think the President may be speaking of constitutional reforms in the context of broader constitutional reforms that is being discussed in his manifesto.
I see. Thank you very much for your messages. They keep coming in. It's 0772 300 305. And then there's another matter that's come up as a result of the 19th Amendment. And I thought, therefore, that I'll read this bit out from our Constitution. You're probably aware of this bit quite easily. And the paper's disappeared here, but well, here we go. The Constitution of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. 4. Article 4. The sovereignty of the people shall be exercised and enjoyed in the following manner. The legislative power of the people shall be exercised by Parliament. B. The executive power of the people, including the defense of Sri Lanka, shall be exercised by the President of the Republic elected by the people. There you go. Article 4B of the Constitution says that the President, the defense of the realm, if you like, is in the hands of the elected President. Why is it then that he can't be the minister by the 19th Amendment? You see what I mean, the 19th Amendment?
I think this is a bit of a grey area in the 19th Amendment, because the 19th Amendment says that the ministers have to be drawn from among members of Parliament. But I think you pointed to the right provision, because it says that the executive power of the people shall be exercised by the President, including the executive power relating to defense. And the people, the President is elected directly by the people, so there is a social contract that the President has directly with the people. So my reading of Article 4B entitles the President to exercise powers relating to national security. I think I'm not the final, person to sort of settle on this, decide on this matter, but I do think that this needs interpretation.
Indeed, because obviously this is one item that needs interpreting now, but also we found out in October as well that it needed interpreting then, or amending then, and it appears to also want interpreting or amendments on at least on one other matter, which is that as a result of the 19th Amendment, the people of Sri Lanka, without having been asked about this, ended up with a 4.5-year fixed term of Parliament. Now, that in my mind is something very substantially different from what this Constitution already said. And therefore, if there was any amendment to that, then we should have had a referendum of the people on the fixed term of Parliament, but we didn't.
Yes, well, actually, the Supreme Court determination did not require a referendum for amending that section.
Right.
But
Really, something as important as that. The fixed term of Parliament, it's not a small matter to be sniffed at.
Yes. I think though that the constitutional crisis that you referred to was a good enough evidence to revisit some of these provisions in the 19th Amendment, because the issue is when there is a deadlock situation similar to, you know, there's something like what you just explained, what is the way out? Because we saw that the President and the Prime Minister could no longer work together.
Right.
There could be situations when the government budget is defeated in Parliament, and still that the Parliament cannot be dissolved because the members of Parliament will not want to bring a resolution requesting a dissolution of Parliament for different reasons. So then what is the alternative in a situation like that? I think those are some of the issues that kind of compels the need to revisit the 19th Amendment.
But do you remember during the 19th Amendment, you know, they all sat together, they had long hours in Parliament, and overnight all but one person signed. So what do you think? Was this a new term and so everybody was very bullish, so they didn't sort of really listen to what was going on?
I think that was a different political context, so I cannot comment on why everyone voted for the 19th Amendment. But the context has changed.
But as citizen Sapramadu, don't you find it anomalous that the public haven't, that they're stuck with the same Parliament for 4.5 years, so they can do whatever they like, even defeat the, even if they get defeated with the finance bill. So the cornerstone of this democracy that we've been used to has been changed without so much as how do you do. And so the people have said, well, look, 19th Amendment was passed by your Parliament, therefore you're stuck with us for 4.5 years. Doesn't sound good for governance.
Yes, I think some amount of stability is required, but then on the other hand, I think constitutional reforms need to reflect the aspirations of the people. But what I see from the 19th Amendment is that it reflected more a political deal. What took place, the dealings between the common candidate and the political forces that supported him at the time in 2015. But that context has changed clearly, and the Parliament, as you rightly said, has run out of its political capital. So this is the very reason why they need to seek a fresh mandate.
Somebody's asking about the, we'll take this question in a minute. The other question was about this expert panel on the on constitutional reform. Within there, somebody also said that it's very difficult to get experts to agree on anything. Was that the reason why, when you all put out this report, we had 6 people in agreement with one report, 2, including you and
Professor Kamina Gunaratne.
Yes. 2 of you were together on another one, and 2 just didn't do anything about it anyway.
Well, I mean, I first like to say that I'm not an expert. It's just so happened that I was nominated to be part of the panel. Yes.
Mr. Dinesh Gunawardene nominated you, right?
Yes, he nominated. Actually, it was his nomination, but was endorsed by the steering committee.
So this is a joint opposition nomination.
Yes, it's a joint opposition nomination, but it was a multi-party steering committee that has to approve all the nominations. So it was really not a political nomination as such.
Right.
The issue there was that some members of the experts panel felt that there needs to be, I think the disagreement was more with regard to the process and of course, you know, some of the content in the documents, where some of us felt that our role was to prepare a document for the consideration of the steering committee and not prepare a draft to be tabled in Parliament. I think this is where the disagreement, this was the root of the disagreement.
Why was it during that time that there were some allegations that some signature had been forged? And Mr. Sumandran said that there was no need, that it didn't arise because it was all done by email.
Yes, I think that was because I don't think anyone signed on the document. It's just that some members put their names in an initial draft.
Right.
And there were a couple of experts who were working from abroad who used to comment, who sent in their input via email.
Oh, I see.
So I think some of those experts, two of them were not here, Professor Suriratnapala and Professor Austin Pulle,
Right.
and they did send their comments via email.
I see. Now then, let's take some of these questions. Lots of institutions, including the media centre, have been brought under the president. Do you think that this is a right step towards democracy? Citizen Sapramadu, not an expert on anything.
I believe that the president has good reason to decide so,
Right.
because he has received an overwhelming mandate, and there probably are reasons why he thought that this was required to be brought under the Ministry of Defence. I'm unable to comment without seeing the Gazette notification. And
Have you got a line to the president? Can you sort of call him up and say, why do you want to do this?
no, unfortunately, I don't have.
You don't have that
such
kind
a
of...
line.
Doing away with the 19th Amendment is one thing, but the need for checking executive power was what the people voted for in 2015. The ensuing 19th Amendment was a mess, no doubt, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Nobody wants an executive presidency with untethered powers. What do you think?
Well, looking at the mandate that Mr. Gotabaya, the president, received in this recent elections, I'm not sure whether that is entirely correct, because I think the failings of the previous government highlighted the need for some sort of a strong leadership in the country. So,
But not one where, surely, if we look at 2015, the people voted President Mahinda Rajapaksa out. And that was, if he had been, that was going to be, you know, after the removal of the two-term limit, for example. I think what this viewer is saying is referring to that and various other measures, which is why they rushed that 19th Amendment straight through, and it did reduce the presidential powers quite substantially. But again, there are various things within that need to be amended. But I think what this viewer is saying is that you need a 19th Amendment, but you only need parts of it.
there are some positives in the positive things in the 19th Amendment. For example, it introduced the right of access to information.
Yeah.
I'm personally happy that it also extended the time given to the public to review bills before between the period of a bill being published in the Gazette and being placed in the order paper of Parliament, so that there is the period of review has increased from 7 days to 14 days, because we do not have post-enactment judicial review in Sri Lanka, so that gives people more time to study the laws that are to be passed. But then of course we saw the situation where that was also you know, how after the Supreme Court makes a determination on a certain bill, it goes to Parliament, and then what is published placed on the order paper is not what comes out, because there are so many amendments that are introduced during the committee stage. We saw that with the Provincial Council Elections Amendment Act, which was initially presented to Parliament as a bill to increase the representation of women in provincial councils, but subsequently was used to as a means to postponing elections to provincial councils. So there are good things in the 19th Amendment. So as I said earlier, I don't know whether there is any conversation of completely abolishing the 19th Amendment. But then again, I think all these things need to be looked at in the context of broader constitutional reforms, because I think it's time that there are certain parts of not just the 19th Amendment, but the Constitution is looked at or revisited.
Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to read one out to you. It says that your guest today is a very honest person and speaks only if she's sure of the subject that she's speaking about. Many speak in past judgments for the sake of voicing their opinion. So thank you for your honesty. There's another one here. when the amendment, I think you referred to this as well, when the amendment was introduced, many pages or many sections were sort of added last moment. And according to this viewer, who says that the viewer begs to defer that the Supreme Court is superior to the will of the people who voted the president in for a period of time. But the 19th Amendment altered it and the Supreme Court held with them.
Sorry, can I ask?
It says here that it begs to defer that the Supreme Court is superior to the will of the people, and it is the people who voted the president in for a period of time. But the 19th Amendment altered that period of time, and the Supreme Court held with the with Parliament, basically.
Yes, 19th Amendment did reduce the term of Parliament from 6 to 5.
This is the thing, the people didn't ask for the president's term to be reduced, and that is a serious amendment to the Constitution, because when I go to the polls, I am voting in my president for a fixed amount of time, and I don't want to be. I feel rather shortchanged when, you know, about a year later or within a year, Parliament willy-nilly changes that and cuts short the presidential term by a year.
I do agree that the 19th Amendment should have been subject to public consultations, and that is one of the main criticisms against the 19th Amendment. So what does it reflect? Whether it reflects the aspirations of the people or whether it reflects the requirements or the political deal at the time. Somehow the Supreme Court did not, there were certain clauses in the initial draft that the Supreme Court felt needed to be approved by the people at a referendum. So the revised draft that was presented did have this provision for reducing the term of Parliament and the presidency, but the Supreme Court did not feel that it required a referendum.
You know, it's always not a good idea to interpret the Constitution in dismembered bits, as somebody famously said. One has to look at the whole intent of it, and in section after section, through various sections and statements within the whole of the Constitution, it's clear that the intent is not to allow any one person to have untrammeled power, which unfortunately what became to the executive presidency in Sri Lanka. And so when President Rajapaksa was moved out of office by the people with 500,000 or whatever it was votes, that whole campaign was about the powers of the president, because there was a real danger that Sri Lanka was going towards an authoritarian but democratic state, and which is why my concern was highlighted when you said according to the mandate, because that's a very Rajapaksa thing, and they kept going on to the world about, well, we have the mandate, but that mandate became possible because of a judgment in the Supreme Court which allowed people to cross over, you know. So that was, I don't know if you you know, so that's, I don't know if you'll agree that we have to amend that bit, because when people can cross over, they can be bought over, and that, on Newsline we say it the way we see it, and that is the whole part of this whole problem, is that because when you can buy people over, they can cross over to you, and you can pay them to think the way you're thinking and to achieve what you want.
I cannot comment on all these transactions because I have not been privy to money being passed, but yes, I agree that there needs to be certain safeguards, there needs to be certain provisions on that, but not to forget that there is something called the freedom of conscience of MPs also. It is not that they always need to toe the party line. So I think there needs to be a balance. This is why I think it's important to look at constitutional reforms. I think all these discussions can be looked at, all these concerns can be looked at. I think it's time that the And
It's time for change.
It's time for change, and I'm happy that the manifesto of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa does refer to constitutional reforms. I'm not.
On that sort of note, let me read that message to you again. It's actually for you, this message, and it says, you should not interpret the people's mandate as narrowly as you are. It's wider, deeper, and more profound than just a vote for the return of an executive presidency. Unchecked power, like that which was conferred in the 18th Amendment, is not the answer to the 19th. You see, and this is the point where everyone's talking about.
Well, once again, there was no way to consult the people as to what they exactly want. Now, during the most recent constitutional reform process, they did have public consultations, but it was only for about a period of 3 months. And that there have been so many people commenting about the fact that the time given was very, very limited to have public consultations across the country. So there had not been a genuine consultation process previously. This is why I think when you look at the manifesto of I'm not actually a spokesperson for the SLPP, but looking at the manifesto, it does talk about a select committee that would hold public consultations.
Do you think we should have a referendum, another referendum on this whole business?
Yes, definitely. It depends on what kind of reforms that will be introduced. Because at this moment, I cannot say what are the reforms are going to look like. Whether a referendum is needed or not will depend on the kind of reforms, the amendments that will be introduced.
Well, already the people have been shortchanged with the term of the presidency, the fixed term of parliament. Nobody asked us. I feel really strongly about that, and there's nothing much I can do, is there? No point me going and knocking on the door of the Supreme Court, because they say, well, we've made the decision. So it's now up to Parliament to go and change it all.
They should have. I also agree that they should have consulted the people when the 19th Amendment was...
As a lawyer, will you get in trouble for saying that?
No, I don't.
No, you won't. That's good. Well, do you, this is the last question because we're coming up to the end of our program this morning. Do you believe a parliamentary democracy is the safest way forward for Sri Lanka, or a constitutional monarchy?
I think that again is not for me to comment on. I would
As a
prefer
citizen Sapramadu, you could.
I would prefer parliamentary democracy, but we've had this system for a long time where the executive presidency and a parliamentary democracy both function together.
Do we have enough time? We may do. GR does tend to prioritize fairly and won't act unconstitutionally, we believe. Do you agree with that?
Sorry, can you
President GR, I presume, does tend to prioritize fairly and won't act unconstitutionally, we believe. So says this viewer.
Yeah, I think so too, and I hope so.
Right. As citizen Sapramadu, you do hope that he will act fairly and constitutionally.
Yes, I do hope so, and I have no reason to think that he has acted unconstitutionally so far. He has taken certain steps to introduce some very essential processes, streamlining certain processes, which I think the public appreciates very much. Particularly with regard to making policy for the way that the government should function. He has taken some very strong, hard steps with regard to introducing certain standards, and he is constitutionally empowered to do those.
Somebody said that they mentioned all these things. I'm just finishing in a moment. Somebody said all the same things that you just said, and then added, he can do it if Minder lets him get on with his job. And that may well be the multi-billion-dollar question. But, Chavindri Sapramadu, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you, Faraz.
We've enjoyed having you here. And that's the way it was on Newsline Live. Take care, have a great day, and God bless.
Ho, ho, ho!